Hello and welcome to this little edition of looking at a different planet. So normally I do lunation forecasts, full and new moons, unless something else is coming up that feels I should speak into it. And that is what I'm feeling at the moment with Saturn moving into Aquarius. Sorry, out of Aquarius into Pisces. So I wanted to do a little chart for this. I've just recorded the full moon in Virgo, which is literally happening about 4 hours, less than 4 hours, in fact, before this particular thing. So if you watch that video, although the planets are moved slightly in where you're seeing this, because this is one that isn't looking at the houses, it's just putting Aries at the first house, which is kind of traditional. So you will see that they may look like they're in a different area, but it's really just the direction that you're looking at it. If you turn it, you'll see that most of the planets are in exactly the same place virtually, if not exactly, that they were at that full moon in Virgo. And the focus of that one was the full moon in Virgo. And the focus of this one is the Saturn moving into Pisces. So there will be a lot said in that previous video that is applicable to this chart, and also you may want to listen to it to get some of the things I won't recall to say again. But suffice to say, when we have something happen in astrology, like in this case, Saturn moving into 0 degrees of Pisces, that we can draw up a chart for that we would call a mundane chart. And this chart kind of it's almost like a birth chart for that thing, that situation. And that gives us an indication of what's going to show up for us for whatever the thing is we're pulling a chart for. So in this case, we're pulling it for a mundane chart for when Saturn enters in Pisces. That means that we can get a bit of a flavor of what the whole Saturn in Pisces story is going to look like. Of course, the story could look many, many different ways. And when we apply that to our own natal chart, it's also going to make a big difference. So, for example, if you are a Saturn in Pisces native, that means you're having a Saturn return. You're either having your first Saturn return around the ages of 28 to 30-ish, or you are having your second Saturn return when you're getting closer to sort of 58 to 60. And either way, the Saturn return really lasts about the whole time that Saturn is in your Saturn sign. So if you have Saturn in Pisces at 0 degrees, obviously that it's going to be most intensified when Saturn gets into Pisces initially, like now, what we're talking about. If your Saturn is at 25 degrees, it's going to intensify as Saturn gets closer to your actual natal Saturn. However, it doesn't matter where your natal Saturn is within Pisces. When Saturn enters Pisces, you are within your Saturn return. So that's anybody who has, this is the symbol for Saturn, this little cross with a crescent. Let's blow this up a little. That's the symbol for Saturn. And that's the symbol for Pisces. So if you were to look at your natal chart and you were to see that Saturn was in Pisces, then you would know I have Saturn in Pisces, therefore this is my Saturn return. We can gauge that, as I said earlier, from the ages. But Saturn returns, although a big deal and something we discuss a lot and gives us a good indication of where our work is, because Saturn is about work, hard work, do the work, put in the effort over time, structure, order. Time, in fact, is a Saturn construct. So you have to put in the time to mature. That's why a Saturn return is kind of looked upon as a growing up phase in everybody's life. I know we're supposed to get the key to the door at 21 or whatever, but it's actually only as we're hitting the end of our 20s and into our 30s where we're kind of like becoming responsible adults. And you will definitely find there's the you that you were before Saturn return and the you that you are after Saturn return. And we can't really prepare for that all that much except to see what happens and try to do the work as it shows up. So what I want to say about Saturn, because he's roughly a 28-year orbit, full cycle to get back to where he was when you were born, there are also points which very much correlate to the moon points. Of the moon, we look from new moon to first quarter moon is 7 days, to 14 days for the full moon, to 21 days for the last quarter, and back to a next new moon by 28 days. And it is the square, opposition, second square, those are the pressure points of a moon cycle. That's where we can do something about it, do our work. When we take that back to talk about Saturn in that situation, we're talking about not 7 days, because the moon moves really fast, but we're talking about 7 years. And there and thereabout, because Saturn takes 2.5 to 3 years in a sign. So when you're working in that space, it's not just the age 7, it's kind of 6 to 8. And it might be a little bit different for each of us. So if you really want to drill into this, you probably need a little help looking at the exact timeline for you personally. But we don't want to get into that today. We just want to say, if you are somebody, because Pisces is a mutable sign. So if you are somebody who has Saturn in any of the mutable signs, those are the square points, square in opposition. So Gemini, Virgo, or, sorry, Sagittarius. Maybe I must make this smaller again. That'll be easier. Bring it down. Okay, there we go. So here's Pisces, 90 degrees to Gemini, 180 degrees to Virgo, another 90 degrees from Sagittarius. Those are going to be the points. So if you, for example, I have Saturn in Virgo, so this is going to be a Saturn opposition for me, not a Saturn return. If you have Saturn in Pisces, it's a Saturn return. If you have Saturn in Virgo, it's a Saturn opposition. And if you have Saturn in either Gemini or Sagittarius, it's a Saturn square. Both of those will have different flavors if they're opening or closing squares. But again, we're not going to get into too much complication. Suffice to say, if you have mutable Virgo in your birth chart, in your natal chart, not mutable Virgo, mutable Saturn, then look in your chart and you know that Saturn's journey through the mutable sign of Pisces is going to be intensified for you. It just is. Depending also, you can look back and see what happened around about the time I was 6 to 8 and 13 to 15 and 20 to 22, thereabouts. Those will give indications. If you're in your second Saturn return, you can look at what happened in your first Saturn return, and that will give you an indication of not exactly what's going to happen, but what themes show up for you in Saturn cycles. And I have found this to be remarkably accurate, remarkably accurate. So that is probably the best way that you can prepare if this is a strong Saturn space for you. If, on the other hand, you have a natal fixed or cardinal Saturn, this isn't going to be as intense for you. Let's say you had a fixed Saturn, you will have just been experiencing your intense part. If you had Saturn in Aquarius or Taurus or Leo or Scorpio, because it's just coming from Saturn, from Aquarius, it would have been that was your intense space. The other thing to look at is if you have mutable signs on the angles. So if you are a mutable rising sign, or you have mutable on your first, the cusp of your first, let me show you, your first here. If you have a mutable sign here, or here, or here, or here on your chart. So again, can you see that that's the 4 directions? We've got the horizon line, and then we've got the axis line. So those are the spaces in your life that are the most transformative, intense, structural. We can use many words for that. So even if that for you is, you don't have Saturn in a mutable sign, but you are mutable at your angular houses, then this is also going to be a bigger deal for you. And if I'm speaking Greek, you may need to get a reading to find out these kinds of things, to learn, okay, this is an opportunity for me to work deeply in my relationships, if you had it at your relationship house, etc. So just understanding why I am kind of feeling into the importance of doing a Saturn video in itself, because it is a powerhouse to work with. Okay, so then again, coming back to the fact that much of what I said in the previous video for the Virgo full moon will also be applicable here. We're having a look at where everything is. And you can see we've got a lot of Pisces planets here piling up, including Saturn, who we're talking about, who's just entered, which means at the time that he enters, Mercury is there, unable to really think clearly. So we have to kind of like go into a dream space almost when our mental body is under the waters of Pisces. Go into a dream space and try and think clearly, but dreams are not clear. And Saturn's coming in and going, you need to get clear. But we're in a completely different realm mentally. So for me, that kind of speaks to the fact that we may find over this next journey of Saturn in Pisces that we are thinking so far outside of what is logical and reasonable and known to us that it may start out as I feel like I'm losing my mind. And then as Saturn's journey continues, it's going to get clearer. Just like if we stir the river sands at the bottom of the water and it goes all murky and sandy and we can't really see, but if we stand still and let the sediment settle, then we can see more clearly, even though we're still in water. I think it's going to be likely that things like that will come up. The sun is also in Pisces at this time, shining his bright light here, saying, this is an important place for our soul's development, our collective soul development, for this journey of Saturn in Pisces. And Neptune has been here for a long time, also very happy in this sign, very much speaks to a lot of the Piscean energies, those Neptunian ones, the imaginal realm, the ideal, the dream space. Again, though, Pisces has this predisposition to addictive tendencies because Pisces emotionally feels the world so acutely that it can be so painful, we'll do anything to not feel. So whatever your drug of choice is, be it workaholism, alcohol, sex addiction, it doesn't matter whatever your addictive personality sort of leans towards, this is often exacerbated with strong Pisces. So check yourself, because Saturn says, hey, bring yourself in line. Again, it gives us that beautiful opportunity to manage our addictive things by putting in systems in place, because Saturn loves that. Giving ourselves time, putting systems in place, getting ourselves organized and structured, shoring up our foundations so that we don't slip through the cracks and fall back into negative habitual patterns. We also have a lot of Aries energy going on here. We have Jupiter in Aries, so he's making it a lot like bigger and intensified. We have Chiron, the wound, in that big warrior space. So we have to kind of really look at what is it that I need to fight to heal, and when is, fighting or violence for the greater good. And am I fighting too soon? And am I fighting for the right reasons? Those kinds of things. And Venus, who's not at her happiest in the sign of Aries because it's Mars ruled, she's also in there. So she brings us into a space of our values and what we want and what we love. We want to fight for love. We want to fight for a higher ideal. We will be a warrior for the new world being. A stronger, open, loving place, even if it has to be a little bit sore, Chiron, to get there. Our Mars energy, who is the ruler of the Aries planets, he's still in his shadow, but he's in the last few degrees of his shadow from doing a retrograde, his post-shadow. So it's almost as if there's so much speeding up on one hand, but then there's this slow down to speed up. Like the energy around us is going so fast that there are a few things in this chart that say to me, it's like, pause and look at it as if you have slowed down the reel and you're just taking a moment to actually take it in so that we can move in a more steady, structured, orderly way and actually make changes, not, again, slip through the cracks into all of our unhealthy patterns because we're completely overwhelmed. And Pisces can bring in a big overwhelm dynamic. So that's really important. I also spoke into the last video about how that anuretic degree, the 29th degree of any sign, is a extremely potent point. So is the 0 point. So at the point of this chart that we're doing, we have Pluto at the 29th degree of Capricorn, and I'm doing a video on this too. Pluto hasn't moved sign since 2008, so this is going to be a big deal. And it happens within the same month as Saturn's move. So he's at the 29th degree and Saturn's at the 0 point, the first degree of the next sign. So I was speaking to it earlier as being like the birth canal. So the whole journey of a planet, and so we had the whole journey of Saturn through Aquarius at that full moon point. He was in the birth canal. He was crowning into the next sign, but he hadn't quite birthed yet. By the time he's birthed into Pisces, we're looking at Pluto, who is crowning through that birth canal of coming out of dying from Capricorn in being birthed into Aquarius. So this energy brings with it the intensity of the lesson of. So we'll say, when we're looking at this chart, we have just experienced the intensity of the lessons of Saturn in Aquarius, and we have birthed into, what is this going to be? I mean, think about a baby being born into this world. It's like being in this perfect amniotic fluid, temperate, all the needs met. The sounds outside have been a little dulled. The temperature has been ideal. So you come out into the world and it's bright and it's loud and it's cold or it's hot or it's just like, what? That's the feeling of birth. That's that first degree. Like, oh, it's almost like, when a baby is born, it's, they take that breath, and you've taken this breath and your eyes ping open and you're like, wow, I'm overwhelmed because I don't know what this new journey brings. It's a real liminal space, the 29th degree of one sign into the 0 degree of another sign. And now in this case, we're also looking at how Pluto over here is in that birth canal. It's like he's gotten a little stuck in the birth canal. He's crowning, but he's not quite ready to come out. And he is feeling all the pressures, all the pressure points and lessons of his journey from 2008. It's a long time. It's like a 15-year journey for him. And Pluto doesn't spend the same amount of time in every sign. So his journey in Aquarius is going to be 20 years. It's one of his longer spaces. But anyway, he's had 15 years to really transform and take his power potential into Capricorn. And now he's feeling that he's ready to birth into a new space, but he's still just consolidating. And actually, in Pluto's case, he is actually going to retrograde back into Capricorn. So it's like, put me back in the womb. I wasn't quite done. So there's a bit of a more strong dynamic there. So when we look at what are the lessons of Saturn in the sign of Pisces going to be, and we see where he enters, we cannot separate it from the Pluto dynamic, because that is a very, very, very strong point. What I love is the moon is still in Virgo for this whole conversation, which says, I need to digest things. I need to edit, because I cannot cope with all of the overwhelm and all of the energy that's happening simultaneously. I need to prioritize. I need to work methodically. I need to file, sort, edit, delete, and I need to check in with my daily healthy habits. I cannot expect myself to cope with the energies of the day if I do not take good care of myself and my needs within the daily details of my world. Whatever my world is for you, that is really, really, really important. And I feel like the moon is really going to hold us here. And the moon is the people. So we really have to, as a collective, start recognizing our healthy habits versus our unhealthy habitual patterns. And how do I start to break those so that I am grounded and stable and safe? And there is a strong dynamic with Virgo Pisces of our immune system, of our gut health. And GI health has become such a common thing to talk about in recent years, and also such a common thing to have struggles with. And so we really are looking at, how do I balance my gut health in order to keep a healthy immune system? Gut health, Virgo, immune system, Pisces, and with that, do the work, Saturn. So, there's always so much more we could say about these things, but I think we're going to leave it at that, just because I don't want to overwhelm. But this is a really big deal. One more thing I just want to say is that Saturn rules Capricorn and Aquarius. So that means he spent 5.5 years to 6 years in signs that he rules, where he's at home, where he's comfortable, where he really has full autonomy in that space. And he's now moved into Jupiter's sign, and Jupiter is kind of boundaryless. Saturn is boundaries. Jupiter is expansion. Saturn is contraction. So in many ways, they are like one another's opposites. And we can't have too much of one and not the other. Like Jupiter's supposed to be the good guy that you want to be around, but too much Jupiter's going to lead to addiction, to excess, to overwhelm. Too much Saturn is going to lead to constriction, hardening, shutting off, boundaries that don't let people in. So we need the balance of both. And when we have Saturn in a Jupiter-ruled sign, that's also part of the work. How do I bring my structured and ordered self into my expansive and overwhelming and sometimes excessive self? And that is going to be another big part of the lesson. And we're going to really feel it because, as I say, Saturn's been soldiering on in his comfort zone in some ways. I mean, Saturn's never super comfortable, but he's more comfortable in the signs of Capricorn and Aquarius than he is in Pisces. So that's also going to bring this dynamic of, oh, I don't know, how do I do that? And you'll start to recognize if you're more Jupiterian or Saturnian in your personality, whether you find it easier to bring in the structure or easier to be in the excess. So these are really interesting little dynamics to dig into for yourself. And if you find this interesting and you want to get a little bit more clear on where your Saturn is or how you can work with Saturn, please do send me a message, check in with me, because I do readings that can help you to figure it all out slowly but surely over time with organization and order and structure in a safe, sustainable way. Those are Saturn messages. So sending you a lot of love, and thank you very much for watching and being here with me. And I appreciate all your likes, shares, follows, subscribes, etc., etc. Thanks very much. Have a great day.